self-regulation, I think, comes into three forms: mental, physical, and emotional. Physical self-regulation is what we generally think of most of the time we think about self-regulation. Like, I'm going to go do push-ups. I want to do 10 push-ups. I get to the eighth push-ups. My arms are hurting, and I push myself through that pain and do two more, right? Physical self-regulation. Another version of physical self-regulation would be, it's cold outside, but I'm able to stay outside and finish a job even though I'm cold. Self-regulation also shows up mentally and emotionally. Mentally would be around focus and attention, being able to stay in a problem longer to find the correct solution. It also comes in emotionally of being able to regulate your emotional state, right? Being able to decide that I'm going to be happy even though it's a stressful environment, as well as to regulate my reaction to other people. If someone comes to me and says something mean, I don't punch them in the face, right? Those different abilities to self-regulate are there in all of us. And we all have different levels of self-regulation. As a SEAL, you have to be very high on all of them, because not only through training, but through the entire job, you're constantly being tested mentally, physically, and emotionally.
And are these abilities that people can learn to acquire? Can you learn to have better self mental regulation, better emotional regulation, or is it you're either born with this or not? Because obviously we know there's something different and unique about SEALs. They're harnessing all three of them. Many of them are born with certain capabilities that are going to lead them in the direction. I think obviously that's a great example with you here. So for the people listening, like if they have great physical self-regulation, but they're struggling maybe the emotional state, are there things that we can do to actually acquire some of these skills?
Well, that's actually one of the most interesting things that I discovered. I went into a super deep dive on self-regulation based on the fact that one of I don't know, challenges and gifts of the Asperger's is I I get stuck on something, I can't get off of it. It's like I'm a pit bull on a sandwich. Like, I can't let go. I have to figure it out. So on one side, it's good because if something doesn't make sense to me, I'm gonna constantly be looking to figure out how it works. The downside to it is I'll often get stuck on things for a long time. One of the things that bothered me was at the beginning of SEAL training, there were individuals that I would have bet my bottom dollar were going to be there at the end, and there were individuals I didn't think were going to last a week. And at the end of training, there were guys that lasted that shouldn't have, and there were guys that should have been at the end that weren't. And I was completely wrong on a number of cases, and that bothered me. And that's what drove me to try and figure out what is the core driver of success through something like SEALs. And then, arguably, if you figure that out, it's going to be applicable to all different areas. And what I found was that self regulation, mental, physical, and emotional, is controlled in the same two parts of the brain. And those parts of the brain work like any other part of the brain. The cerebellum, the back part of your brain, is is your hand-eye coordination. So that's like your baseball part of the brain. We know that if we practice baseball, we're going to get better at it, right? We build up neural connections, we refine those neural networks, and through that process of practicing and learning, practicing, gaining experience, we get better and better. Well, self-regulation is no different. So the ability to self-regulate is a skill, not a trait. It's not something you're born with, like the color of your hair. It's something that you develop over time. Not only do you develop it over time, but every day you're either reinforcing that skill, practicing self-regulation, or you're practicing quitting. You're practicing the opposite of it. And so our ability as an individual, not only can we get better at it, but we have to kind of protect our skill or our resources when it comes to using our self-regulation. So very much so, very developable skill. And the cool part is if you're really good at one, see, I'm really good at physical, but I'm no good at mental self-regulation. I can't focus. That is merely a need for clearer purpose on something. You have the raw skill for that.
Yeah, I love how you frame everything in kind of a behavioral change like framework, right? Like what I'm hearing, what obviously I'm picking up out of your book, the research that I've done on you, everything is centered around our ability to monitor, control, and change certain behaviors. And that's exactly what I just kind of heard you. And I think that's the world that I live and operate from. And that's why inside of a porn addiction recovery program, I have practices like fasting, like physical development, training programs, because if you can learn some of these physical things, then the emotional, mental side of things, you'll be able to transfer over that. So once again, we're running the same, wavelength here. And I love you're tapping into neuroscience. When did neuroscience really become uh, something that you were interested in and really pursuing? And what role has that played in the work, the leadership, all of these things that you're building and creating?
Uh, Before I answer that question, I want to reinforce what you were just saying when it comes to because within the audience that you're talking about or the men that you're helping, I think this is a very should be a very empowering thing. Wherever you have built up self regulation, be it mentally, physically, or emotionally, you can transfer that power to other areas. So if you're build it up physically and you want to apply it to emotional or mental, you can. There's two parts to this. The first part is power, and the second part is purpose. So the power is how much power of self regulation you have, how much of you practice self regulation. Now, say, like for me, as a kid, it was different, that got picked on a lot. I practiced emotional self regulation every day because kids would say mean things and I had to learn not to react to them. So I did that my whole life because emotionally, I always felt attacked and therefore I had to regulate emotionally. As soon as and when I was growing up, I didn't care about baseball. Also, I wasn't physically, no one would look at me and say, oh, he's really good at physical self regulation. As soon as I got to buds and my purpose was physical self regulation, I took the power that I had developed in emotional self regulation and applied to physical, and I graduated at the top of my class. So that ability to understand that if you build the power of self-regulation and you have a really clear purpose as to where you want to apply it, you can leverage it anywhere. So these men that you're working with, not only is your philosophy of building it on all levels important, like you're dead on with that, but giving them the knowledge that if they look at their life, they do regulate emotionally, they do regulate mentally, they do regulate physically. It's just a matter of having that clear purpose of applying it towards, say, regulating when it comes to the pornography.